So, I'm going to be talking about SNAP recipients and work requirements. I saw one of my favorite creators talking about this. I weirdly have some experience with this. So, I'm like old and have lived like many different lives. And for a while there, I was an HR manager in corporate for a massive like Fortune 500 company. Okay. I worked in New York City. However, we got a call saying that there was a hiring emergency and they needed some of the folks from corporate in New York City to drive over to one of their like satellite locations in West Virginia to help with hiring. Okay. So I drove over to West Virginia. I'd never been there before. I now know that the place that I went to in West Virginia had really, really, really bad PFAS contamination in the water. In fact, that was one of like the original places for all the PFAS contamination. It's from like dark waters and everything, right? I didn't know that at the time though. There were so many things that were really striking about that visit that were really eye-opening, right? However, one of the things that really stuck out to me was that when the people that were at that location in West Virginia, when they were walking us through, they were teaching us, they were telling us what the plan was. They're like, okay, so we're going to open the doors at 7 a.m. tomorrow. We have a hiring fair, a job fair, okay? And all of these folks are going to come in. Now, what you have to do is check their name within our system because they might have already worked here and they may not be hireable again. I thought that was really weird. I'm like, wait a sec. They might have worked here before, but they might not be rehireable. I mean, how many people is this? Well, it was apparently very sizable, like hundreds of people that had worked at that place before, but were not able to be rehired again. Why? And they said, well, that's because they stopped coming to work. And so we had to fire them in the system. I said, that's really weird. Why would they do that? And she said, it's because of work requirements to receive state benefits. I'm like, why wouldn't they just quit, right? If they didn't want to work the job. And the lady that ran the HR in that area, she explained that once they hit a certain amount of hours, they would no longer be able to receive like SNAP benefits and other assistance from the state. However, the amount of money that they would be making at this place would not be enough to cover their needs, right? And if they quit, then that would not look good, I guess, for the state for them to receive benefits, right? So instead, they had to be fired. They had to be fired in order for the state to see, oh, okay, we can still pay you your benefits because you haven't worked this many hours and the company fired you, right? And that's all of that. All that is to say, the company that I was working for at the time, yes, they should have paid people more. And they did actually pay people more in that area versus some of the competition, right? They actually did have competitive wages. Obviously, it needed to be a lot more, not just like a little more. It needed to be a lot more, right, to pay a livable wage. But the state's requirements for work, that was just creating this weird loophole that all of these middle-aged white guys, I'm sorry, they were all middle-aged white dudes, they were all exploiting it. There were no illegal immigrants, there were no minorities. It was all middle-aged white guys. They were all exploiting this loophole. So that is what the system created. They didn't create better workers, they just created a human resources nightmare as workers would just bounce around from company to company to company, basically doing this, getting as much as they could assistance from the state and getting as much as they could from private companies because then they might be able to piece together enough money to live, but otherwise they wouldn't. There's a lot wrong with that system. The question should not be how many people are exploiting the system. The question should be, why do so many people need assistance? And it is because no one's getting paid a fucking livable wage based on inflation, because of the loss of unions, because of the lack of regulations on corporations, because of lots of other things. But it is not the poor people's fault. It is the government's fault. It's the government's fault for allowing billionaire corporations to treat people like that.